Hajime was a broke bum who took in an orphan he found starving in the dungeon, only to discover she had a secret ability to magically increase the defense on her plot armor every single night. He took her on adventures in hopes of making her stronger to finally be independent and be able to live on her own. Hajime grew up in the slums. His parents abandoned him when he was 9. He would steal, fight monsters, and hunt for his own food, even killing a wolf at one time. He wanted so much more, so he kept fighting and running until he reached a small town and realized he wasn't hungry anymore. One morning, he ran into an old hag who expressed her gratitude for him being such a friendly adventurer to the townsfolk. He entered the dungeon to catch fresh meat, but when he approached, he noticed the door already opened. Inside, he encountered a slime monster eating a little kid. He panicked and quickly pulled the kid out. She happily introduced herself as Riri. When he told her his name was Hajime, he knocked her over the head, then asked what she was doing there and where her parents were. Riri explained her parents abandoned her and she had nowhere to go. Since she wasn't from town, he assumed she would end up in the slums like he did and didn't even care, then walked away. She asked where he was going. He said he was going to look for something to hunt to eat. He told her not to follow because he wasn't going to share. Her stomach started growling, so she started following anyway. They went down a floor and encountered a wild boar. Hajime pulled out a large warhammer and obliterated it in the forehead. They went outside, and Riri fainted at the sight of him butchering the beast. When they got back to town, the elf baddie at the guild congratulated him on the quest. She took a look inside the wagon and was disgusted with what she saw. He told her she was not from the town, so the orphanage wouldn't take her in. He then said he was going to take a quick stroll and told her he would be right back. Hajime walked into the local orphanage that took in peasant children. The nun asked if he was there to pray. He said no and asked if they had room for another child the same size as the ones playing with garbage over there. She said no, they didn't. On the way back to town, Olive came running to inform him that Riri took off out of nowhere. She had overheard her receiving an urgent request for large monster droppings found in the cotton fields by the mountain. Hajime took off running in that direction and realized how desperate she would have to be to have run off toward the mountains. He caught up to her engaging a wolf in battle. He rushed in between, blocked her from harm, and beat it to death with his giant warhammer. Afterwards, he scolded her for losing to a slime and having the audacity to go after a mountain wolf. Riri started crying, claiming she was starving, so she had to try something. Hajime told her if she stopped crying, she could stay with him and eat as much as she could. He then turned to the beast and told her to watch closely, demonstrating how to properly harvest the monster. He claimed he had to bring back meat for the townsfolk for, allowing him to live there. Later that night, they brought the beast back and held a feast for the peasants, while Riri ate as much as she could. The very next morning, she suddenly grew plot armor and then shrunk back down.
Yeah, boy.
While having breakfast, he told Natalie, the server, that Riri might be one of the ancient species. She asked how he knew. He said her plot armor was a lot larger than hers, causing her to blush and run away. Hajime informed Olive to look into it just in case so he didn't end up in an orange jumpsuit or on the list. He then turned to Riri and told her if she didn't hunt, she couldn't eat. She got excited for the next dungeon run, claiming her sword would taste the blood of a slime today. Once they entered the dungeon, they immediately saw a slime. Riri rushed in and instantly got consumed. Hajime pulled her out, but she rushed in again. They spent hours, but she wasn't able to kill a single slime. He told her it was lunchtime and they went outside. They stood at a vantage point, looking over the entire town. He passed her a piece of bread, but she declined. He was confused and asked why. She said she couldn't kill the slime, so she couldn't eat, then proceeded to tell him to eat his fill. When he heard those words, he realized reality had finally hit her. She didn't want to be a burden or have him abandon her as well. Frustrated with his inner emotions, he tried to force her to eat the bread, but she refused again. Hajime started walking toward the dungeon and told her if a party member doesn't eat, he wouldn't either, then told her to hurry and slay a damn slime so they could both eat. When they went back, he had her analyze it and taught her how to properly kill it. He threw a rock to the side and had her sneak up behind the slime, shanking its eyes out. She celebrated her first kill, and they finally got to eat together as they left the dungeon. They brought the slime materials back to Olive, who was impressed at how much they had bonded already. Later that night, Olive was doing research and discovered the girl was a succubus. Later that night, Riri grew her plot armor and snuck up behind Hajime.
Yeah, boy.
She sniffed him and thought he smelled really good. The very next morning, Hajime told Olive that he had the strangest nightmare that a mountain wolf kept sniffing him. When she informed him that the girl was a succubus, he was surprised. Riri said she had never even heard of them. Olive explained it was one of the few ancient species alongside the vampires, werewolves, medusas, and merpeople. Olive suggested asking another one of her kind to confirm, while Hajime sighed, as the only one he knew was menacingly diabolical. They got back to the inn, and found a disgusting pig talking to a woman named Veronica. He asked her how much she charged for her adventuring services, and she stated more than he had to offer. He grabbed hold of her and tried to strike her down, but she smashed him onto the table. She started emitting a dark aura and beat him down until he ran out. Hajime greeted his old friend while she took a seat on a simple elf and introduced herself to Riri. Veronica asked for Riri's hand. When she held it out, Riri started glowing and transformed into a blonde baddie.
Yeah, boy.
Veronica claimed they synchronized and confirmed she was a succubus just like her. Riri excitedly asked if she was the same as her. Would she become as powerful as her one day? Veronica smiled and said yes, if she trained. She asked what motivated her to become so strong. Veronica said it was to be able to watch men suffer, while Hajime said she was as black-hearted as always. He asked how much she wanted for this information, but she said it was okay. He insisted, and while extremely drunk, admitted she was a diabolical bitch and didn't want to owe her a penny, which caught her off guard. While Riri ate, he offered to pay her tab at the end. The very next morning, Veronica knocked on their door. She took a good look at Riri and started rizzing her up immediately. She offered to take her off his hands and employ her at her maid cafe, further stating her gorgeous face was wasted going hunting in the dungeon with him. She had a menacing smile, insisting they were getting along too well and he was up to no good, but he disagreed. Riri begged him to let her stay. Suddenly, Veronica made further allegations, and he denied them again, which crushed her heart. She started tearing up. Veronica asked if he would miss her, but his ego wouldn't let her win, and he admitted it would be smooth sailing without her. Riri walked away heartbroken, while Veronica laughed in his face for calling her a diabolical bitch. When they approached the dungeon, Veronica tried to comfort her by calling Hajime a broke bum. Her simp elf stated he was jealous that she was rizzing him up instead of him. While walking in the dungeon, Riri suddenly set off a teleportation trap, and Veronica grabbed her at the last second, causing them to teleport together. Hajime panicked, but the elf suggested keeping a calm attitude and traveling to the lower floors. Hajime thanked him and asked if he had a name. The simp elf told him to refer to him as the swine. As they walked the lower floors, they encountered a golem. Riri freaked out, but just before it could snatch her up, Veronica uppercutted it into the abyss. Excited with their first kill, Riri rushed deeper into the dungeon, but was suddenly chased back by a giant cyclops. When they ran into a secret treasure room, Riri told the baddie to hide inside the treasure box while she would bait and lure it away. Veronica flicked her on the head and told her they would both hide. While climbing in, Riri dropped her sword out in front. Hajime made it to the lower floor just in time. He tried to strike him down, but Hajime ran out of patience, jumped up, and slammed it down on its cranium. He picked up Riri's sword and worried she may have already perished. He heard rumbling coming from the chest, then opened it up and was relieved Riri and his ultimate baddie were alive. They spent the rest of the day harvesting dungeon ore together, and Veronica realized the swine was missing. They got back to the inn, and Riri was still down in the dumps, but a drunk Hajime told her to stop sulking and eat her dinner. She patted him on the back and said thanks for letting her stay. Veronica giggled and said he passed her test, claiming if he tried anything diabolical, she would cast a curse on him that would rot his adventuring staff. Hajime burned Riri's skirt with a magic stone because he was an incompetent fool, so they went to the market to shop for clothes. She stopped by the barbecue pit like a glutton, then ran up to a tribal man selling a legendary egg. Hajime immediately called him a credit card scam caller and asked what kind of egg it was. The bummy man said he had no clue and predicted it would bring good fortune. Hajime immediately knew he was a credit card scam caller and called him a bum, but Riri was sold. She begged him to purchase it for her and asked him to trust her like she trusted him. He proceeded to get scammed. As they walked away, a little girl bumped into them, then ran off. When they got back to the inn, Riri showed off her new clothes. Veronica was surprised since Hajime had picked them out, but he had gotten a referral from the baddie Natalie. Riri walked over and was devastated to see her Humpty Dumpty cooked and fried over easy. He pulled it out, and her mood changed from delicate flower to happy duckling. Afterwards, they went into the dungeon and ran into the dwarf kid from before. Suddenly, both the dwarf and Riri were being devoured by the lowly slimes. Hajime saved them, then brought the dwarf home. Her grandmother apologized for the trouble. When Onyango woke up, her grandmother told her to forget about the dungeon. She called her an old hag, then ran off. She explained that Onyango's parents died from a monster, so she was all alone. Riri followed her outside, and the old hag offered Hajime money to chaperone her in the dungeon because he was a broke bum. Riri asked Onyango if she would join their party if Hajime agreed to it. They walked over to Hajime, and he accepted her because the old hag begged him to, but told her no more solo dungeon dives. Riri cheered as she finally got a friend traveling with her and the broke bum. When they went to hunt slimes, the pair used Hajime's technique and finally started killing the slimes. Suddenly, a group of pathetic weaklings came running through with a pack chasing them. Hajime yelled to the girls to step aside, but Onyango tripped and fell. Hajime jumped in and shielded her from harm. When Riri saw what had transpired, her inner demon came out with a diabolical stare. She inched toward Onyango and declared she shall not steal from her. The next morning, Riri had a dream that she was able to use fire magic to save Hajime and Onyango. She woke up with an idea. She found Hajime rizzing up Natalie and requested that he teach her magic. He told her he was a swordsman, but Natalie suggested taking Riri to find out what her spirit channeling type was. Hajime thought it over and realized it could be helpful, so he decided to go. He took her to see Cressida, the old lady from the church that shares the teachings of the sun. She turned and asked if they wanted to hear the story of the sun, but Hajime told her to deny her offer. The old hag was immediately offended. She took them to a shrine, and it started glowing. A door appeared in the middle, bearing the crest of each pillar. The door opened, and they told her to step in. She turned and asked if he was coming, but he said it was her trial. He told her he would come save her if she got into any trouble, and she set off with a smile. The old hag requested 5 silver coins because her church were some broke peasants. Riri frolicked through the forest and saw many creatures she had never seen before. She thought about what Hajime said, then set off on her adventure. Suddenly, she bumped into a creepy, diabolical giant squirrel. It turned around, looking like someone on a list. When it glared at her, she ran away terrified for her life. She came across a tunnel, crawled through, found a leaf, and slid down until she landed on a beach. While enjoying the view and gentle breeze, a massive sea tortoise with a silly mustache named Bob emerged from the ocean. Riri picked up a handful of sand and tossed it at Bob, but it did 0 damage. Bob leaned forward and burped in her face. Suddenly, she felt a droplet of water hit her hand. She took off her glove, and a droplet with 2 scales appeared in her hand. Looking real sus, the magical door reappeared, and she walked through. She told them a giant tortoise with a silly mustache appeared before her and burped in her face. The old hag explained the tortoise was a millennium, the burp was a blessing, and the droplet with 2 scales signified a greater water blessing. She looked at Hajime and demanded to go to the dungeon to test it out. They found a lowly slime, and she activated her water magic, but all she could do was water the Zaza plants with it. Then she got eaten again. When they got back to the guild, Olive congratulated them on leveling up. She suggested taking the kids on a promotional quest and tackling a dungeon. They entered the dungeon and were surprised it was so peaceful. They made their way through, and despite many battles and challenges, they finally made it to the dungeon boss. Riri charged in but was pushed down. She used her water magic, but it was useless. Anyango rushed in, but the Meta Knight blocked her attack, then countered. The Meta Knight slipped, and they jumped him while he was down. Hajime patted them on the heads and congratulated both of them for clearing a dungeon. When they got back to town, they greeted the dungeon destroyer and her giant snake. Olive introduced her as Miss Sekihime. The girls started trembling with fear as the giant snake loomed over them. They refused to believe that the dungeon destroyer was a nice person, but Hajime said the destroyer was Miss Sekihime, not the snake, which left the girls in complete shock. The next morning, Miss Sekihime let Riri ride on her giant snake. She was a member of an ancient species that could turn anything she looked at into stone, like this super duper baddie right here. When she opened her Mongek, Q Sharingan eyes, she turned the entire dungeon into stone. It started collapsing above them as they made their escape. When he first heard about Miss Sekihime, he thought she was the luckiest person in the world because she got to be full-time employed by the guild. But after he met her, he realized he was sorely mistaken. Riri noticed her continuously staring up at the sky, and Hajime explained it was because the sky wouldn't turn to stone. Riri said she looked sad. The next morning, Hajime turned into a child. Miss Sekihime was overjoyed, cheering with happiness as she walked around with her eyes open and not turning anything into stone. They encountered a lowly slime, while Hajime pondered what could have possibly happened to them. Suddenly, they were both eaten and had to be saved by a little Hajime. They made their way through the dungeon, encountering many new experiences for her. They arrived at the beach, where Riri met Bob with the silly mustache. A giant wandering whale flew over them, knocking Miss Sekihime down with its ocean riz. Hajime noticed a marking on Riri's arm and realized it was a special skill like Veronica. He then realized she was a concubus, a special kind of succubus with the power to control people's dreams. Miss Sekihime recognized the power and thanked her for the experience and grand adventure. Suddenly, Hajime grew back to normal size. When Miss Sekihime saw his beautiful face, declared he was her type, started rizzing him up, and asked him to go on a date. The next morning, the snake woman asked when he would get back, making Riri extremely jealous and causing her to growl. When they entered the dungeon, Riri was viciously hunting down slimes, showing no mercy at all. While Hajime pondered on what to do with the woman Orochimaru, and Yango asked him what was wrong with the two of them, and Riri came over and asked if he and the snake hag dated. What would they even do? He proceeded to explain plot armor to them, but their tiny minds couldn't comprehend the complexity of his explanation. They got back to the guild and turned in all of the slimes that Riri slaughtered in an angry rage. Olive informed them that the snake woman was staying another night. While Riri looked at him in disgust, Hajime told her she had asked him out for a riz night, and Olive warned him not to break her back or she would turn him into stone. During dinner, she offered him some water to wash down his food, while everyone at the inn looked at her like the revolting lizard she was. When she poured the water, she completely missed the cup, then Hajime stopped her. Veronica pulled him to the side. He thought he was getting a special dance, but when they went upstairs, she demanded that he break the snake woman's heart. She claimed she watched countless men fall in love with her, but he never did. Veronica wanted him to request to blow her back out so she could refuse and break his heart instead. Suddenly, Riri came up behind them and declared she would grow up to be big and strong to be worthy of his adventuring party. He sighed and said he only had one option. It was to riz her up for one night and break her heart. Hajime went outside to talk with the snake woman, while Veronica, Riri, and Natalie spied. She started talking about their romantic rendezvous, but he declared it wasn't a date. She asked if she had done something wrong, but he said no, he just didn't want to get involved and apologized. She started weeping and screaming, and the ground started trembling from her magic power. Then, suddenly, he declared they would date because there would be free plot massages. But the moment he said those words, Veronica clowned him. Natalie called him misogynistic, and the snake woman had a dark aura emanating from her. Then she disappeared for all eternity. Riri imagined a giant green dragon emerging from her Humpty Dumpty, but Hajime suggested cooking an IHOP omelet because he was tired of the peasant food there, but Riri strongly objected. The very next morning, she woke up to the egg slowly hatching, but when Hajime woke up, he called it breakfast. Riri greeted Natalie the baddie and Veronica, the toxic baddie, downstairs, and introduced them to the dragon. When Hajime heard what she had named it, he said it was obviously a sparrow flyer, a chubby bird. She looked at the chicklet but didn't care because it was adorable. Hajime then said he had a pet of his own at one point. It was a scruffy little dog he met in the trenches. When he had free time, he would teach it all kinds of tricks. But then a rainstorm that lasted days hit. Poor weather meant no work, and that meant no food. Scruffy had hoped for the best, but Hajime took one look at him and decided to have him for dinner. Veronica suggested she keep that bird in her sights at all times, while Natalie called him scum. They entered a dungeon and introduced the dragon to a lowly slime. Riri told it to be very quiet because slimes reacted to sound. Dragon suddenly chirped and the slime turned around. It approached them and devoured them both. It happened 10 more times. Riri had hoped that Hajime wouldn't be angry, but when Hajime said the little guy was a bad match for slimes, he picked him up and started squishing him. They went back to the inn and dropped him off while they went back to the dungeon to hunt slimes. Riri went crazy like a madman and started slaughtering every slime she saw. After the battle, she leveled up, and they returned to the dragon to find the entire room completely trashed. The poultry had even taken a dump in Hajime's pillow. Riri assigned it a job at the inn serving tables, but it flopped on the ground and failed. Natalie asked what was going on, and Riri said Hajime would eat him if he wasn't useful. Natalie asked if he was serious, and he said damn straight. She was horrified. Hajime took off to patrol the village's perimeter, while Riri stayed behind to school the young dragon. Instead of learning proper manners, the dragon immediately took a dump midair. Hajime came across a family of dragons that looked awfully delicious and a giant pile of dragon poop, which showed signs of a rabbit bear on the loose. He went back to the guild to inform Olive, and she made an official request for him to exterminate this new threat. The next morning, they noticed Natalie was looking ill. She said she was fine, but the inn owner asked her to take the day off. Riri volunteered to take over her work for the day, but Natalie insisted on staying. Hajime swooped her off her feet and rizzed her into taking the day off, causing the master and Riri to get jealous. Riri spent the day helping the master around the inn so he wouldn't break his back from being too old. Later that night, Hajime suggested to Olive to hire a beast tracker. When he vents to Riri about having trouble tracking a monster in nature, she decides to help him out. The next day, Riri asked Hajime if she could follow him into the forest. He said to keep the ugly dumpling away from his feet. The dragon suddenly wandered off on his own. When they caught up to him, he found his fellow sparrow flyers. The overgrown dragon called out to the others, and the dragon led them away. They followed it, and the dragon successfully tracked down and led them to their prey. Hajime quickly slayed the beast and praised the dragon's S-rank tracking skills. Riri excitedly cheered for him, while Hajime said the dragon was more useful than her. When they got back to the inn, Riri started serving the drinks to prove she was more useful than the dragon. Suddenly, an overgrown hater arrived with a message for Veronica. Her maid cafe Succubus Wings had gone out of business, and she was a broke bitch again. The elf informed Veronica that her business crashed literally, and the building caved in. Hajime clowned her for being a bum and not getting proper building permits. She turned to him and rizzed him into accompanying her back. She declared that if there was any foul play involved, she would show the offenders no mercy. When they arrived, a furry baddie stopped by with a group of worthless hags. Veronica immediately blamed them for being responsible, but they claimed a mist dragon had suddenly landed on it and flew away after it collapsed. The furry baddie confirmed it and said the guild made an official report earlier that morning. Dragon policy was the only one she hadn't taken when she got monster insurance. The worthless hag claimed she would take care of her maid employees until she was able to properly employ them again on one condition: grant Master Rashad his freedom. None of them knew who that was. Veronica called over the swine and slapped him up, then sat down and asked if she was still in love with him. Veronica would agree to her request if the old hag agreed to fund the entire renovation project. The hag suggested competing in a dungeon attack, If Veronica won, she would pay half the renovation costs. If the hag won, the swine would go free. Veronica would become her new servant. Veronica confidently agreed. Later that night, Veronica started to panic. The hag had a group of vile, disgusting creatures in her party and was known for buying dungeon maps. They all looked at the swine in disgust and thought about giving up. But she needed those renovation funds because she was a brokey, not even considered a baddie anymore. The next morning, she taunted the other team, slapping the swine right in front of her. Their objective was to slay the resurrection monster of the middle floors, and they would win. When they started, the disgusting kitties rushed in and set off a trap that went straight for their leader. The swine jumped in front and took the blow to the face, causing Veronica to step in and beat him up. While they fought over the swine, Riri pushed ahead, but they hit dead end. Dragon's S-rank tracking skills revealed a secret tunnel. They went in and discovered a treasure room, while Veronica was still whooping that ass. When they opened it up, Riri was disappointed because it was grown folks sized, but Hajime threw it on her and told her to try it on. After she put it on, it suddenly shrunk down and sized itself to her height and size. They arrived at the boss room and saw the disgusting kitties still fighting a golden Magakarp walking on 2 legs. She attempted to rush in and die, but Hajime pulled her back and suggested using a water spell. Riri casted a twin water dragon jutsu, using her new staff and gear, and flooded the boss room, drowning the walking golden fish. The gross kitties turned around and commended her for catching the body. The old hag and Veronica finally slid down to the boss room and asked who won. The disgusting cats or Hajime, but they all pointed at Riri. Veronica thanked her for saving her from a life of being a bum brokey. When they got back, Hajime surrounded himself with a bunch of baddies employed by Veronica's cafe, while Riri watched. Then she pulled them away. They stopped to purchase perfume for Olive because she requested a gift, since Hajime was always trying to riz her with no game. Hajime took Riri to the slums to pay his respects at his friend's grave, Ricky Bobby. When they walked by, the men looked at them like depraved lunatics, but Hajime said they were looking at the overgrown chicklet, starving for a meal. Riri ran up to an old man and told Hajime he was selling his trash, but the old man recognized Hajime. He asked if Riri was his daughter, but he immediately denied it. She asked if he knew Hajime, and he said Hajime used to try to steal from him when he'd set up shop. When Riri heard he was stealing the old man's trash, she looked at them both like some broke bums. Suddenly, a thief ran by and snatched the dragon. Riri chased him in tears, then unleashed her twin water dragon jutsu and flooded the boy straight into a bummy shop. The man ran outside demanding to know who destroyed his shop, and when he saw Hajime, he saluted him like a good boy. His loser friend asked what he was so afraid of, and the moment he disrespected Hajime, the man stabbed his broke bum friend in the head with a toothpick, while Hajime laughed it off and walked away. They finally got to the grave. When Hajime put down the Hennessy in commissary for his bud, a couple of street urchins came by and snatched it up. Riri asked why he allowed that to happen, and he said he used to do the same when he was a child. Hajime started reminiscing about the past. He told Riri this was life's final adventure, and he hoped wherever they weren't hungry anymore. While walking back, Riri told him that if only she had been around when he was younger, she would have done anything to make his life easier. On the way back, the old man was getting wasted on a fine Friday afternoon, while the peasant children fished for rats. Riri said she wanted to try, so Hajime went over to a tree and kicked it. He told her to use the fat, juicy caterpillar that landed. She tied it up and threw it down. When a rat came out, the peasant children crushed them with rocks. She continued to try with the peasant children while Hajime had some Hennessy with the old man. He thought about what Riri had said and realized his childhood would have been a lot funner with her around, while she accidentally crushed her caterpillar. When they got back to town, Riri brought back a souvenir for Natalie, a sculpture of the dungeon boss. The overgrown chicken overheard and thought they must have been powerful adventurers, so he hired them as escorts for his dungeon research. The next morning, Riri got into an argument with the chicken man's daughter, Kuko, because she was slandering Hajime and adventurers. While the chicken man was checking out a wild boar, debating if he should go riz it up or not, Riri asked why he would do this, if he could just ask the people at the guild about them. The chicken man explained that through observation, one would be able to properly analyze a monster's behavior, and gave an example of a slime hiding in the corner, and if one checked behind it, it would be hiding sacred treasure. His daughter roasted her for not knowing such basic knowledge, and said that was why adventurers were so stupid. But Riri wasn't soft and spat a loogie in her face, causing Hajime to smack them both in the head. They continued their way through the dungeon, while the chicken people made their observations. Afterwards, Hajime went back to the guild to inform Olive of the nerdy chicken, and she was immediately interested in some fried chicken knowledge. She thanked him for the perfume he brought back, and then handed him a stack of job requests. Meanwhile, at the inn, the chicklet asked Natalie if she could bring her father some food. Natalie asked if he was the scholar, and she said yes. The men behind them started mocking them. They noticed her father was the chicken man, then called him a literal bird brain and laughed it off, causing the little chicklet to run away. When she got upstairs, Hajime and Riri were coming up, so she hid in the corner. Riri said even though the chicken man was a genius, didn't mean his bum chicken nugget daughter could be so rude. When she heard that, she broke down while smiling. The next morning, the chicken man approached them and thanked Hajime for referring him to the elf baddie because they bought all of his data and promised to purchase future work as well. The chicklet approached and offered a truce and friendship, but Riri growled at her like a rabid dog. Hajime tried to leave Riri behind, but she latched onto him. He tricked her by pointing out a flying slime, and when she realized it wasn't there, he was gone. Olive came out and asked for their help. She realized Onyango could read and write, so she assigned her to help with guild work while Riri cleaned the building. During that time, Riri looked over and felt left out. She tried picking up a box, but couldn't, while Onyango carried two at a time. She flipped over and fell with the box on top of her. Onyango ran over and helped her up, but Riri started tearing up, claiming she was useless, realizing she was completely worthless to Hajime, and started weeping. Onyango started crying since her best friend was crying. Then Olive came up the stairs. Olive sat them down and taught them an important lesson. She praised them for tackling every task with a smile, regardless of what it was. An adventurer typically gets leftover tasks or quests that require more work than they are paid for. But even if it's dull, one still has to take the job seriously or risk putting the village in danger. When it came to adventurers, what mattered most to her was how earnestly they approached their tasks. It was an uncommon but valuable skill, one that they both and Hajime shared. Later that night, Hajime returned and noticed Riri with Olive. She told him she and Onyango helped out at the guild and requested that he teach Riri how to read and write. The next morning, he took her to school with Onyango so she could learn and spend time with other kids. When she got inside, she was already frustrated because the know-it-all chicklet was there. The teacher paired the two of them together for the chicklet to teach Riri how to read and write. She asked why Riri was worried about academics and not fighting, but Riri said that wasn't good enough. She wanted to be able to record monster data and much more. She said she wanted to be just like Hajime. The chicklet felt compelled to say she wanted to be like the chicken man. Onyango came by and asked if she was Riri's new friend, and for some reason, she said no. After school, the kids played outside while the chicken man and Hajime played with bugs like some dirty infants. Later that night, a mysterious earthquake shook the entire town, waking everyone in the middle of the night. While leaving the dungeon, three dorks approached the dynamic duo, trying to jump them, but Hajime didn't hesitate and knocked them all out first. They claimed to be the village's very own neighborhood watch. Natalie came strolling by and greeted Hajime and Riri. She noticed the neighborhood watch peon and recognized him as her childhood friend Jan. Hajime immediately recognized he was a simp, then asked Natalie if she liked him, but she said he was just a friend and a broke bum. Hajime proceeded to clown him further until he started crying like a little baby. He took out his sword, but Hajime booted him in the face. While his friends dragged him away, he screamed that Hajime would never be part of the town. Back at the inn, Riri asked what that bum loser meant by that last comment, and Hajime explained he had only moved in when he met her, so he was still new in town. Riri said they would be more accepting if he didn't go around beating up every simp in town. That night, another mysterious earthquake occurred again. The chicken man and Olive held a meeting at the guild. They informed everyone it was a Spikosaurus. They theorized it climbed onto a resting wandering whale, hitched a ride, and made its way to their territory. They were territorial beasts and were probably currently fighting off all of the native monsters over land, which was causing the strange tremors every night. Olive mentioned that for a mission of this difficulty, it would take a group of silver rank adventurers. They asked Hajime, a pure silver rank, for advice, and he said it was difficult to say. Jan dissed him in front of the entire village, but his father slapped him, telling him to shut his mouth. He said he was just voicing his concern, but his father said he was nothing but a dirty bum and proceeded to beat him up. The next morning, Jan and his party went missing. Olive came running and informed everyone that some villagers saw the trio heading up into the mountain toward the Spikosaurus. Hajime volunteered to bring them back. Natalie came running and told Hajime if he brought them back, she would let him blow her back out. He then told Riri she had to sit it out. Jan's father told Hajime that, when he brought him back, he would off the loser himself. Riri swung her sword like a maniac in front of everyone, while Olive gave Hajime an ominous stare, telepathically asking if he was really taking Riri with him. Hajime announced that he told her to stay behind, so if she died, it was her responsibility. Riri cheered and said she would try not to. They hopped on the camel, and he told her to shut up so she wouldn't bite her tongue, while Olive was visibly disappointed. The three idiots came upon a giant footprint and started wimping out, but Jan insisted on pushing forward. Suddenly, the Spikosaurus shot out of the forest and landed right in front of them. Its eyes lit up red, like a Sharingan, and it swung its tail, obliterating Jan into a tree. It rolled up into a ball and rushed toward them, but Hajime made it just in time with his warhammer. He struck it back, leaving the three noobs speechless. Hajime told them to run home because their parents were waiting. The girls suggested retreating and leaving it to the big boy. Riri charged in like a lunatic, but Jan pulled her back, picked her up, and retreated. The Spikosaurus got ready and charged him, but he smashed it down. After it bounced back, he struck it again and knocked off its horn. It charged him again and pushed him back. He got up, but he was leaking. He picked up the boulder behind him and tossed it at the monster, then approached slowly with his warhammer. It charged at full speed, but Hajime stopped it with one swing and struck it again, then jumped up and delivered the killing blow. After the battle, Jan and his party started glazing his glizzy. Suddenly, another earthquake happened, and the ground below Riri started cracking. Hajime pushed her out of the way, and a giant pink worm from SpongeBob came up and ate Hajime's arm. Suddenly, Hajime activated his ability, the War God's Flowing Crimson. With a murderous glare in his eyes, he had to make it count. It tried to dive back underground, but he snatched it and stopped it, then pulled it back out with one hand. He punched it in the head and obliterated it like One Punch Man. After the battle, Riri couldn't believe that Hajime lost his arm trying to protect her. When they got back to the village, everyone was shocked, and they tended to his wound. Olive addressed the situation with the guild, and they suggested restoring his arm as soon as possible. When she came outside, there was a starving bum stealing her food. Olive apologized to him for not knowing about the second creature that took his arm from him. Hajime told her to calm down and approached her, then romantically picked up the bowling balls and told her he still had his right hand. She started emanating a dark aura, then calmed down and said if it made him feel better, go right ahead. But he rejected the offer because they were mini compared to Veronica's. She punched him and deformed his face. For the rest of the day, the entire village stopped by to visit him, everyone except Riri. Onyango came by next and was immediately disgusted with his arm. The chief of the dwarves came to visit with her to thank him for giving the village a hand, and Onyango pulled up a chair for him to sit, but he was a fridge. He proposed making a prosthetic arm for him. Onyango claimed his work was the best, and that he was the luckiest man in the world. He asked how much he would charge him, but he said the village and guild would cover it, so Hajime immediately accepted. He looked out the window and spotted Riri hanging behind a dusty old tree. Onyango called out to her, but when she heard her, Riri fled. He then vented to Onyango that he lost his arm saving her and was confused that she was hanging with a tree instead of him. Onyango pointed out the obvious, that she probably assumed they couldn't adventure together anymore because she was useless. Hajime was confused and asked if that was a girl's thing. He asked if she really thought he was out of the game because he was a crip-rapping blue now. Hajime then asked her to follow him. They retrieved the troublemaker together and made their way out of town. He reached a giant tree and put her down. Hajime told him the mission today was to pick the fruit at the very top. Riri said he couldn't rock climb anymore because he was an old crip, completely disrespecting him. He started flexing his muscles and began climbing the tree with one arm. On the way up, a bird flew by and woodpecked his head until he fell to the ground. Now he was a double crip. Once he finally made it up, he dropped down a rope so the two children could climb up as well. Riri started crying, claiming an easy task like that was considered an S-rank mission for him now. Hajime opened up and said he had a lot to say about it, but then said he was just glad she was okay after everything. That meant the world to her as her eyes lit up with relief hearing those words. She declared she was going to get stronger, strong enough to take care of him. While eating at the inn, the baddie babe walked in on a visit to town. Concerned for her Giga Chad man, the swine sat down, and then Veronica took a seat. She offered to take over his jobs while he was out there crippin', but they asked if she and the swine were capable, and she pointed out the swine was a top-ranked silver adventurer just like her and Hajime, which surprised everyone. He came across the kids and saw Onyango building a chair for the chief so the fridge wouldn't break another one. Suddenly, an old fart nearby threw his back out, pulling radishes. The girls offered to pull them for him. When they pulled it out, it had legs wiggling, surprising them completely. They chased it down and whacked it until it perished. Hajime stopped by the giant dwarf's place for his prosthetic arm and noticed the quality. When they got back to the inn, he noticed Veronica already back and asked Natalie how the quests went. She mentioned the swine's superior swordsmanship and being proficient in using spirit magic. When Hajime heard that, he wondered if he would be a good mentor in teaching Riri how to fight. He kneeled down and stared him down, then told him to remove his plot armor. Suddenly, Veronica kicked him in his plots and stomped him out. The next morning, Riri used her powers to sneak into Hajime's dreams, but he immediately knew and woke up, then told her he wasn't trying to end up on a list. Later that day, they tagged along with Veronica and the swine to get a glimpse of the swine's power. He continued to stare him down, and when Veronica noticed, she got frustrated that his attention was focused on a piece of furniture instead of her and proceeded to stomp on the swine. Riri started staring at Hajime's arm, but he immediately told her to stop and that it was rude. Hajime used his team rocket launcher and shot the bird that pecked his head the day before, then launched himself onto the tree to show Riri his arm was fine. Riri asked if he was a bronze rank now. He said no, and told her to stop worrying. Hajime turned to the swine because he was doing nothing, but a bear suddenly popped up behind him. Hajime planned to let him handle it, but Veronica kicked it in the chin and sent it running. She turned around and tried to riz Hajime with that elegant attack, then told her to step aside next time. She proceeded to attempt to shank him like toxic piece of work when suddenly a wolf approached the girls, but the swine took it down with arrows. Hajime marched up to him and demanded to know why the town was raving about his sword skills and spirit magic, but the swine admitted he was using wind magic to slice up the monsters the day before. Hajime broke down to his knees, claiming he wasted an entire day he could have spent raising up Natalie or Olive. A short, round loser traveled far and wide to see the beautiful Veronica, while the others stared in disgust. He was the mayor of the city her business was at and a regular at her maid cafe and couldn't wait to see her, so he took a vacation to come visit. The man was an incredible simp. He brought the city's treasury to bring her back after hearing she had set off to be an adventurer. Veronica declared that out of curiosity, she took on a new quest to explore the world of adventures since many of her patrons were fellow adventurers themselves. After a pleasant night, the man left the town. Her attendant asked how long she would be staying in this peasant town, and she said as long as it takes to riz Hajime. Veronica went back inside and shared the treasures with everyone at the inn. Riri looked up to Veronica and asked how she was able to enchant people and make them give her presents. Veronica said once she was as skilled as she was, using her ancient species powers, she would be able to use her magic just like her. Veronica suggested growing out her hair, saying she had beautiful blonde hair and it would be a waste to leave it short. She looked over at Hajime and said his hairstyle made him look like a complete bum and offered to cut it for him. They went to another room and began his fresh cut. They started talking about their past and how long they knew each other. Surprising both of them, they had both reached pure silver rank. Hajime said it was impressive to have the mayor as her number one and the powerful elf following her around, then jokingly said she had been in town for too long and told her to run home. However, she suddenly poked him in the head, claiming it was an accident and telling him not to move. After they were done, Veronica went out for a walk, while Riri waited for Hajime to wake up, but she had a diabolical plan. Veronica stepped out and reminisced on all the baddies she saved, allowing them to work at her maid cafe, and decided to pack up and head home. On the way back to town, she overheard some cowards in distress. They told her a spider had made its nest in the barn, but they were too scared to kill it. She stepped in closer, and it broke out of the barn. The men ran away and left her by herself. Olive came running and asking for Hajime. Riri panicked and said he was still sleeping. Hajime said he was awake and was already walking down. She informed them that a spider kidnapped the baddie, but she suddenly stopped, speechless at the diabolical fresh cut that Riri gave him. Olive and Natalie burst out in tears when they saw that he was bald. He turned into a demon and turned to Riri and asked where Veronica went. Riri said she went for a walk, and he began growling. Olive stated it was a hawk-eyed spider, and they drag their prey to their nest and leave them until they are too weak and frail, then devour them. Both the swine and her elf attendant begged him to save her, while Riri was trembling in fear. Hajime and Riri swung through the spider's nest like Tarzan. He shouted that she better not be dead, or she would get cracked. The spider came out ready for a fight. He started smashing it with his warhammer, and immediately obliterated it. Riri cheered with excitement and said he might not have had hair but still had skills. Then suddenly, a worm came out of the wormhole and shoved Hajime down into the abyss. He shouted to her to continue looking for his baddie. Riri looked for Veronica by herself but couldn't find her anywhere. But all of a sudden, Veronica called out when she heard Rurui's voice. She climbed up into a tunnel and found Veronica, but the spider came back and struck her down. When she saw Riri's sword, it reminded her of all the heartwarming times she had with her. Her heart started racing. She started getting desperate, then cut her hair and jumped in between them just in time and blocked its attack. It counterattacked, but she shoved her out of the way. It came in for the kill, but Bald Daddy came up and obliterated it again and finally ended its reign of terror. When she saw him, she clowned him for having absolutely no hair at all. He blamed her for having no hairstyling skills as a woman, but she claimed she gave him a proper fresh cut as Riri inched away. Suddenly, she claimed she thought he looked rather dashing and handsome. When they realized the diabolical cut was from her, he knocked her over the head. After everyone was safe and out, she apologized and said she thought he looked really cool, while Veronica continued to clown him. And while they walked off, Veronica complimented her styling skills. A few months later, Hajime's hair grew back, and he, Rurui, and Natalie went to the dungeon market together. Natalie spotted a cute necklace that was out of her price range, but Hajime purchased it and put it on her right away to riz her up and down. After putting it on, she felt a cold gaze, and when she turned around, Riri was staring at her like a rabid dog. Riri then called out to Hajime and asked for a present as well. Hajime bought her meat since she was such a glutton, and she lashed out like a maniac. Riri asked Veronica for advice while they hit the bathhouses together. She advised Riri to put effort into looking beautiful that way. Men would riz her up no matter what. But Riri asked if Veronica was not considered beautiful because she never saw Hajime showering her with gifts or rizzing her up, instantly shattering her dignity. She didn't want to rely on her powers. With her charming mystic eye, she could get whatever she wanted out if she tried, except it would be temporary and it felt like cheating. Riri asked if she could teach her such magic, but Veronica said it varies from person to person and she would have to wait for her power to awaken naturally. Veronica told her to cheer up and that she had a present for her tomorrow. The very next day, She did Riri's makeup at the inn. When Hajime saw her lip gloss, he said she must have had meat early in the morning and told her not to eat too much or she'd end up a fatty loser, causing Riri to start throwing everything in the room at him. On the way into the dungeon, Riri asked when he would start treating her like an adult, but he said she was fine the way she is, causing Onyango to be confused by his words. Riri spent the entire day in the dungeon massacring the slimes, hoping to become more powerful and helpful. Suddenly, she stepped on a trap, fell to the floor below, and landed on top of a boar. It started rampaging, but she jumped off just before it crashed into a wall and obliterated itself. Riri took out her blade and stabbed it in the heart and ended up covered in blood. When Hajime caught up, he congratulated her and patted her on the head. Riri realized this was a greater feeling than if she used her charm. Then suddenly, she leveled up and acquired the charm skill. She smiled diabolically and thought it couldn't hurt to try it once. She winked at him and said everything was okay, but it didn't work at all. She kept winking and winking, but it was working on everything else except him. Hajime realized what she was doing and noticed a huge level gap rendered it ineffective. Riri thought to herself and wondered what it could be. She got up and ran toward him again with another attempt, but he just asked if she had something in her eye. The next day at school, Onyango surprised her with a deer mask. The Bountiful Harvest Festival was coming up, so they were making preparations. They told her there would be lots of tasty foods, and Riri immediately suggested attending. They spent the rest of the day making more decorations. They looked over and saw a rotten boy harassing two girls with his anteater, a pet for peasants. Riri walked up to it and used her conqueror's haki, subjugating the peasant boy's anteater with her charm and depressing it. Riri ordered it to attack the peasant boy, and it chased him away. She proceeded to brag to the girls she saved that she had dark powers. When she got home, she told Hajime all about her big plans for the festival and the meat stall. Later that night, Hajime thought to himself and tried to remember if he had been to any festivals, but he wasn't so fortunate as a child. He would watch the commotion from the dark alleyways and could only dream about what normal people did for fun. Hajime smiled and went to sleep, happy that Riri would be able to experience what he hadn't as a child. Later in the night, magic beasts attacked, and Hajime suddenly woke up. The night watch came running and confronted the beasts that climbed over the walls. One of them made it past them, but the great Hajime was there to annihilate it with his hammer like Thor. John informed him that the rabbit bear started jumping the fence and suddenly a wolf ran past, but the swine bodied it with his arrows. Veronica called out to the swine, and the chair sat. She told him good boy for hitting his marks, and he said thank you, but she proceeded to caress him because the furniture didn't speak. She gave him his reward and beat him halfway into heaven. Veronica then informed Hajime that as the full moon approached, the blood of the ancient species began to boil. He got back to the inn and saw the chains on Riri's charm skill glowing and realized the attack was due to her powers. It happened again the next night and started to concern him. The next day, he approached Olive and asked her about the situation, and she said it had been a major nuisance in the village, which worried Hajime. That very night, more and more magic beasts showed up. Hajime went back to the inn and woke Riri up. She realized her charm skill was glowing. Hajime asked if she could make it stop, but she couldn't. She asked what was going on, but he claimed it was her dark powers emerging and her forbidden power beginning to awaken, which frightened her. But suddenly, she started laughing and declared she would use that power for the sake of their peasant village, though Hajime suggested keeping it a secret in case any Diddies learned the truth. Hajime spent the whole night slaying magical beasts and left bodies all over the village. He got back and went right to sleep. He started having dreams of when he was a street urchin, stealing just to eat a meal with his two peasant friends. They all shared one rat between the three of them, but it was good times and delicious. They went to bed with their stomachs still growling. Ricky, the boy in the middle, asked what they wanted to be when they were grown. Hajime said he just wanted to live a happy life and not starve. Bobby said he'd like to get married to Veronica, but Ricky said he wanted to be a resident adventurer, someone who lived in a small town and protected it, a place where friends could call home and protect together. When he woke up, he saw that Riri was gone and went right back to sleep. Riri, Onyango, and Cuckoo set up their stall for the festival and spent the day getting ready together. That same night, Hajime spent the night fighting again, while Riri slept safely at home. Riri suddenly woke up and went to the bathroom. She used the blanket to cover up her charm skill, but on the way, she tripped and fell while Natalie was in the corner and saw the entire thing. The next morning, she waited downstairs for Hajime's return and asked him about the glowing mark on Riri's arm. Hajime said it was nothing and she had nothing to worry about. Then Natalie asked if it was related to the magic beasts attacking and if they should report it to the village elder, and Hajime paused, then told her it was unrelated and walked off. Her father tasked Dragon with chasing off the Mickey Mouses, and Natalie took her frustration out on him, telling him to leave the Disney character alone. Olive came in asking about Hajime, and Riri said he was still asleep. Riri asked if it was really that bad at night, and Olive said it was. Before leaving for the festival, Riri and Cuckoo told Olive to be sure to stop by their stall. Natalie asked what she needed from Hajime, and Olive mentioned something seemed to be worrying him, and she wanted to do something nice for him considering all he had done for them. The way she described him losing his arm made Natalie cry tears, and she decided to tell her the truth. Later that night, Hajime went out and beheaded more monsters. He ruthlessly slaughtered them all over town. The monsters kept coming and kept getting more aggressive. The next morning, Riri left the inn excited to be the first one at the stall, but she stopped when she overheard Olive warning the townsfolk that the magic beasts could attack as early as the afternoon. Olive warned everyone that it was the ancient species that Hajime had taken in. Unaware Olive was on her side, Riri realized Hajime had been out every night because of her. Worried about the festival being ruined, she ran away as fast as she could. Everyone held an intervention for him when he returned from his nightly massacre. Veronica pinched his ear and reminded him if he had any issues with Riri, she should be the first to hear about it. Olive asked if he really trusted her so little that he would think she would forsake Riri if she found out the truth. Hajime was confused and asked what was going on, but Natalie stepped up and apologized that she told them the truth about Riri. They all gathered together and decided to protect her as a village. The old hag stated that when an ancient species loses control of their power, it usually wears off after a little while. Olive said once they waited out, Riri's power would be back to normal. Veronica said they just needed to hold out until the night of the full moon. When he heard everyone's words, it reminded him of what his friends Ricky Bobby said about having a village come together as a happy family. Hajime went to check on Riri, and she was gone. Natalie went to the festival to inform Onyango and Cuckoo, and they decided to go help look for her, but Natalie requested they stay and man the food stall. She told them it was Hajime's job, and if Riri returned to a depressed horror film set, she would be depressed and run away again. Cuckoo agreed and accepted their task. The entire village gathered at the inn to set up a search party and search the entire perimeter of the village. Hajime searched everywhere but couldn't find her. Suddenly, Dragon suggested leading the way. A pair of dragon twins spotted Riri and started signaling to the other chickens, her location like a submarine sonar. A rabbit bear approached Riri and pushed her off the cliff. At the very bottom, she was confronted by a trio of wolves. Just before it could devour her, Dragon flew in and used its special attack and smashed it. Suddenly, Hajime arrived and obliterated it onto the ground, while an angry mob of villagers came running in. Hajime picked up her little head and told her they were all worried about her, and if she needed help, all she had to do was ask. He asked her what she wanted to do, and she said she just wanted to go to the festival with everyone. Hajime then told her if she wanted to be on his team, she would have to stop crying, and that reminded her of the very first day they met. After annihilating all of the wolves, they went back into town to enjoy the festival. Riri finally got to the stall and apologized for taking so long, and Yango told her to get cooking. Everyone was waiting for her, and Cuckoo put a chef's hat on her head, while all of her friends waited in line to try their Korean barbecue skewers. Riri suddenly grew her plot armor and danced with everyone in the middle of town. At the end of the night, the deer god's spirit manifested in front of everyone, then flew away and blessed the entire town with a bountiful harvest. Riri picked up what was known as the Star of Fortune. They rained down at the end of every festival. Riri picked one out for both her and Hajime. With both of his best friends dead and gone, he finally saw their lifelong dream come true with Riri and the entire village. If you made it this far, comment plot lover below to confuse the viewers. And watch this video next.